Sup all, EJK here, and got a request from Revotus on Team Liquid. He made his very own account, or account could have been made a while ago, but his very first post was requesting an analysis between Bomber and Panic, specifically Game 1. So what he's probably referring to is the Marine Hellion build that Bomber did in both the Match 1 and Match 2 against Panic. There we go. So, without further ado, let's begin. I've been doing this build recently on ladder, and I really like how it plays out. It's a very good foreigners. It's a very good build because it's a factory opener, but alright, so basically what you want to do is you want to kill as many probes as possible when you do pressure. And with Hellions and Marines, you have maximum mobility to deal with to deal economic damage. However, this build is slightly weak towards Protoss aggression, as we'll see in Game 2. Other things like oracles, good building placement especially destroys Hellions. And oracles also shut this down relatively easily. You don't have an engineering bay very fast. You have a very minimal amount of Marines, not enough to defend both bases, and you don't have Widow Mines to place to try to pop an oracle either. With that said, we have to look at kind of the psychology of why. Psychology? Yeah, the psychology of why Bomber picked this build. Now, Bomber is known for being a very greedy player, a very macro greedy player. And for Panic, he doesn't know. Well, like, he probably expected Bomber to do some sort of greedy opener, like 1 racks 3cc, cc first into 3cc, or just some greedy build in general. But Bomber chose this build, getting the 2 Marines especially to really fool Panic into what he's doing. And so mind games coming to play. Panic decides to go Nexus first on this map, thinking that Bomber would do a greedy build himself. And so Panic is in all-out macro mode right now. And he also sees the command center as well, and I believe he sees it almost done. He doesn't know for sure. Okay, he didn't know for sure how fast it was, so he probably thinks like this very well could look like a gasless expand, like just 1 racks CC. The timing is very similar, and he didn't have enough time with the probe to check on the life of the command center as well. So this is an important part of the game, the first tipping point, you could call it, because Panic sees the command center and he sees the 2 Marines, and he's thinking this is most likely a very greedy build from Bomber, and we see it adapted in his play, making that sentry, making a bunch of probes as well. He's been constantly chronoing probes out, and around the 7-15 minute mark is when this hits, Bomber having his 6 Marines in the natural mineral line. But we see that if Panic had gone for an Oracle before Mothership Core after Nexus, then that could have done a considerable amount of damage. Because there's simply just not enough Marines to stop the Oracle from doing damage. The Oracle's going to get a lot of damage. We also see Panic even getting the 2 gases very fast before the 7-minute mark, so he's in all-out macro mode. And as soon as these stalkers sees these Hellions, all of a sudden he's pooping his pants, and he does a very good job of having that pylon at the high ground, because he knows he's going to have to hold this high ground and evacuate the probes immediately as well. And he waits with the force field and tries to get it off at the very last second, but barely messes up. And he was trying to let as many probes as possible in. Now, even if the Protoss player went for a Mothership Core expand, he would have he still would only have one photon overcharge available to him. And just the fact that of how Panic has opened up indicates that he was not expecting this at all. These on-the-fly decisions, making the pylon wall, having the Sanctuary ready for force field, making that Immortal as well. He was not going to do an Immortal bust, but after losing half of his probes, he has no other choice but to do an Immortal bust. But all the things that Panic had been doing, especially getting the 2 gases right before 7 minutes, indicated that he was expecting a very macro-oriented build to come out of Bomber. And that only can help Bomber with these mind games that are going on in this best of 3. Now, all that's left for Bomber is to defend this Immortal push, power up on 2 bases, and just win the game eventually. Now, one thing that I want to talk about Immortal busts is Immortal busts start to get really scary when you start to have like 3+ Immortals, because that's when Immortals start to, I believe, like 3 or 4 shot. They just shred apart Marauders. They also shred apart Marines in about the same number of hits, because Immortals still hit really hard against Marines, even though they do bonus damage to armor. I think it's like 25 and 50. And so, well, Bomber scouts that it's Immortal bust. He sees no probes at the natural too, so he's going to start some extra bunkers right now. And then he also has the SCV to scout for any kind of frontal assault. Bomber being a little bit hasty here, losing, I believe that was 4 Marauders when he should have lost none. It's a bit of a mistake by him, but he's very far ahead to the point where as long as he over defends and he doesn't take too much damage and he keeps the bunker up, he will win, because behind this Panic has no tech and he has a very small diminishing economy. Now these 3 Immortals here, this is the strongest point of Panic's attack. These 3 Immortals, see them just busting down units. It's really hard to pick up units against 3 Immortals as well, because they usually die before you can get them in the medevac. Now, unfortunately, Panic can't really do anything because he only has 3 Immortals for DPS. Bomber is losing a lot of mining time. If Panic had like 10 additional probes, he would have been able to transition out of this and be slightly ahead, containing the Terran player with all of these Sanctuaries for a while. But he is forced to take an engagement, and although he has a very large number of Sanctuaries, force fields do not deal damage, and basically the force fields allow the Immortals to do as much damage as possible whilst taking as little damage as possible. Sanctuaries do no damage, and they do not tank as well. If there were Zealots or Stalkers or just something else, Panic would have been in a much better spot. But as a result, nope. RIP. So moving on to game 2, Bomber decides to do a very similar build, except he opens up Reaper Expand this time. One of the benefits of... oh, what the hell? That really happened. One of the benefits of opening up Reaper in this game is that as a Protoss player, you just don't know what Bomber can do. Reaper Opener typically leads towards factory openings or a 3rd command center, which Flash has been favoring recently in a lot of his TvP games. Reaper Expand, get a reactor, then get a 3rd command center, then 3 Raxes. You can get the factory like Maru does, or you can just go for 3 Raxes. I believe Innovation has started to do 3 Raxes with double tech labs, and he does a combat shield stim push with 2 Marauders and a handful of Marines as the poke, I should say. That's pretty cool. I wonder who Scarlett Johansson is, though. I don't recognize that face. Now, Panic is probably, well, not really sure what Panic could expect or is expecting in this second game versus Bomber. However, he does have a good idea of what he wants to do depending on what he scouts. And he scouts the barracks on time. He sees the gas very shortly, so he knows it's a Reaper expand. And what he does after is also cool. Well, first of all, he hides his probe. He lets Bomber kind of lets the probe in. Not the best thing. Bomber also playing very greedy. In a standard Reaper expand, you send your SCV out at 14 so that you can check for proxy gates. Bomber instead scouts for it. And what also happens is if you send the SCV out slowly like what Bomber did, you don't know what if the what the Protoss player is doing, so you're relying on the Reaper to get in there and get information. In this case, Bomber saw the Nexus going down, and his Reaper is still out on the map, and he also knows that there is a probe out on the map either, and he has not seen the probe head back. So this is kind of a blunder on Bomber's part. Not really sure what his Reaper is doing, but it should have been safeguarding against this probe. Well, okay, I guess it was. It returned back to the natural, but Panic hit it in a very nice location, and the probe is able to get a full scout off on Bomber's base. Great read by Panic. He basically knows exactly what Bomber is going to be doing. There's only a handful of options: Widow Mine drop, fake Widow Mine drop, getting Widow Mines defensively and adding on faster barracks, or doing the Hellion Marine attack again. In this case, Bomber chooses to do the Marine Hellion attack again. Panic already has a semi-wall off at his main. That's one of the fixes that he's made or has already prepared, I guess, prepared for his building placement. And he's also going to be adding in a second and third gateway. A very fast gateway attack like this is very strong against this kind of play by Bomber. And Panic also gets an observer as well from the robotics facility, so the Widow Mines aren't going to do any. They aren't going to stop this gateway attack either. So we see that Panic is at only 28 probes. He cuts probe production very slightly to add the second and third gateways on. And unfortunately, we don't get a good glance at what his economy looks like, but at least we have the Workers tab, which tells us he has not been chronoing probes out. 99% sure he is saving up chronos so he can get another warp-in round out as fast as possible, and so that he can do a lot of damage. And I'm sure he even chronoed out maybe even one stalker to get out the 3 stalkers very fast. And then he sees the 4 Hellions and he's like, oh, ha, 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 I know exactly what you're doing and you're dead. This is revenge for manor muling me. A Bomber doing a slight variation. He wanted to do a Hellion drop. However, just the fact that he invested these Hellions means that he's out to get blood. He's out to do damage with this and kill probes. However, like I said earlier, this kind of Marine Hellion push or build or harass is very weak against gateway all-ins. Now, Bomber, you might be a bit confused why Bomber, oh my gosh, please go back to the freaking bunker. Why Bomber has no bunker. However, in the first game, I checked around the 7-ish minute mark, so around this time, Panic had about 10 probes more off of that Nexus first, and the fact that he spent a lot of his chrono boost. He had his 3rd and 4th gas already taken, and then his 2nd and 3rd gateways have just started. In this game, his 2nd and 3rd gateways are done. He also has 3 stalkers as well. He doesn't. Last game, his first 3 gateway units was a Zealot, a Sentry, and a Stalker. This game, it's 3 Stalkers. Very, very big difference. Stalkers are very... Triple Stalker can mean a lot of different things as well, and it can be a lot more aggressive compared to having a Zealot and Sentry as well. Now, Bomber also, besides opening for Reaper, he's opened up pretty much the same way, and I also checked, and he adds his bunker at the same time as well. So his bunker starts around the 7:30 mark, but as we can see, it's too late. Now this could be an adjustment that Panic has also done, or it's just another thing that Panic has in the back of his head to know that. Oh, and he also moves all of his probes because he knows he only has 1 photon overcharge. He knows that Hellions are out on the map, so he doesn't want to. He wants to take as little damage as possible because, excuse me, this is pretty all-in. He's not even building any probes right now. This is a very all-in, very fast gateway attack designed to do a lot of damage and catch the Terran player off guard. It's a very good timing against factory openings. Now, we don't know if Panic would have done this same build if he had not seen the factory, but because he scouted the factory, it was a good decision by him. Like, he might not have done this reaction if he didn't see the factory, because this wouldn't be nearly as good against 3 barracks. So, I guess quick overcap. Marine Hellion attack is a very aggressive build. It's good against macro players. It's good against macro builds. It's not so great against things such as Oracles because you don't have Widow Mines as defense against the gateway attack that we see in Game 2. And you want to deal as much probe damage as possible. And also, when you're attacking, the Protoss player only has 1 photon overcharge. And also be careful about building placement as well, because some Protoss players have they've prepared buildings so that the Hellions do very little damage, and then they have like some Stalkers to complete the wall off. So what ends up happening is there's a photon overcharge in the main to stop the Marines from doing damage, and you can have 3 Stalkers and building placement to stop the Hellions from getting into the natural. But other than that, pretty much standard factory opener, and then you just transition by getting 3 barracks in the command center or 5 barracks in the command center. So, hope that was a good analysis for you, Revotus, and you definitely try the build out on ladder. I think if you scout an all-in or just a 1-base play, you should probably make Widow Mines and play defensively instead of going for Hellions. Like, just scrap the Hellions altogether. And just don't do it against like 1 base or like double gas builds, because you know double gas is going to be some sort of tech, and Widow Mines are a lot better at dealing with it. If you guys have any other videos that you want me to go over, I will, or just like leave a link somewhere on Reddit, on Team Liquid, on YouTube, and I'll get to it as soon as possible. See you guys.